The story started with the cheering of the people of Isgard. The cheering was because of the return of the victorious soldiers from the battlefield. They were referring to them as heroes. Two little children were running on the street to catch the event of the parade of soldiers. The little girl was telling her brother to slow down because her leg was hurting from all the running. Her brother told her to hurry up because he did not want to miss the parade. But he came to an abrupt stop because he saw someone passing him. The girl came beside her brother and asked him why he stopped running all of a sudden. The girl also noticed that the person, who was wearing a black cape, was going in a different direction from the parade. She tried to tell that person the location of the parade, but her brother stopped her from even staring at him. According to her brother, that person was a dark mage, and in Isgard, dark mages were considered cursed beings. The dark mage was known as Minold. His real name was Kim Minjun. He was not from this world. He arrived at the temple where the saint resided. The saint was looking out of the big window when she felt his presence. She welcomed him for coming back unscathed. Minold or Kim Minjun threw the head of the enemy at the saint's feet. He declared that the last threat to Isgard was then eliminated. The saint went on to thank Kim Minjun on the behalf of the empire, but Kim Minjun stopped her because that was not something he wanted. He told the saint to fulfill her end of the promise just like he had fulfilled his. The saint tried her best to make Kim Minjun understand that the reason she made him do the job of being a dark mage was not that she despised him, but that Kim Minjun was far from understanding. He commented that he disliked the saint so much right then that he could die that instant. She also tried to show her gratitude to Minjun because he worked so hard for the empire from the shadows. She asked again if he really wanted to go back to his world because, with his contribution, the reputation of dark mages could be changed. Minjun was determined to return to his world. He told the saint that using him to that extent was quite enough and that she should let him return. The saint tried to pursue Minjun by offering that he would be rewarded for all the ill treatment he had received so far if he stayed back for the empire's sake. Minjun gave a disdainful laugh and told the saint to stop pretending. He even asked her what reward she was able to give him. The saint told him that she would give him anything that he wanted. Then Minjun started asking for things like Korean fried chicken, a monstrous PC with unique specs and the fastest internet connection, etc. He even commented that the food they fed him there was disgusting as hell. Minjun accused the saint of force summoning him into this world and using him like a slave. The saint felt dejected and agreed to start the process of the returning ceremony. The saint took Minjun to the place where he was summoned for the first time and instructed him to stand in the summoning seal. Then the saint released the protection of the saint from Minjun. Basically, it was a restraint that restricted Minjun from attacking the saint. With this gone, he would be able to kill the saint if he wanted to. The saint even told him that he could go ahead and kill her if he wanted, but Minjun did not attack her. The saint could not understand why Minjun wanted to go back even though he had obtained such incredible power there. The saint moved to the next stage of the ceremony where she would remove the powers that Minjun had obtained in Isgard because it would be dangerous for Minjun to travel through the dimensional portal with the powers from there. But Minjun had another plan. He attacked the saint using his dark magic. He did not kill her, but she was unable to move and fell to the ground. The saint sought answers for Minjun's mad behavior from him, to which Minjun said that he would never leave these powers that he worked so hard to gain. The saint thought that Minjun would not be able to open the dimensional portal using his power, but she was shocked to see that he had done the inevitable without breaking any sweat. The saint tried to stop Minjun and told him that he should not attempt dimensional travel so rashly. But Minjun corrected her and told her that he had reached the peak of his magic power, and that he had practiced over 1,000 times to successfully open the portal. Minjun told the saint that it did not matter if one was a dark magic user or not because every magic worked the same. The saint tried to stop him before leaving, but Minjun went through the portal and bade the saint farewell. The saint cursed that it was not like she was doing all these because she enjoyed it. Minjun returned to his old room. He was out of breath because he never knew dimension travel would feel this scary. He stood up and noticed his phone charging over the table. He took the phone and almost cried in pleasure because he had missed the sensation of touching a phone. He checked that it was really his phone, but it showed that there was no network or internet connection on it. It had been 2 years since Minjun had traveled to Isgard, which he referred to as the hellhole. He changed into normal clothes and started roaming outside his house in search of the network. He could not comprehend why there was no network there and why all the stores were closed. The military soldiers that were dispatched to that area at that moment were shocked to see a civilian in that place. Apparently, civilians had been restricted from entering that particular area over the course of time Minjun was in Isgard, but Minjun did not know that. Minjun thought the soldiers might be doing some new training because it was very unlikely for them to appear in a civilian residential area. Suddenly, the corporal of those soldiers, Choi In-ho, shouted at Minju to run. Minju looked behind him and saw a black mutt rushing his way. He was not fazed at all, because to him, a mutt like that was not even worth a punch. He tried to use his dark magic, but it was all gone. The black beast jumped at him, but Minjun easily defeated it using his physical strength. The soldiers were shocked to see that. Minjun commented that even though he could not use his dark magic because of the lack of demonic energy, he was not that weak to be beaten by a beast of that level. Minjun suddenly got reminded of the hard training he went through in Isgard. What Minjun could not understand was what a beast like that was doing in that place. Choi In-ho took the responsibility of taking Minjun to a safe place. Minjun could have gone to jail if Choi In-ho's commander did not forbid him to escalate the situation. Choi In-ho was suspicious of Minjun because everyone in the world knew about the current situation with the demonic beasts, but Minjun seemed clueless about it. Minjun gave a vague excuse like returning from abroad as his reason for cluelessness, which did not sit right, but Choi In-ho restrained himself from asking anything more because Minjun was not something he could deal with compared to his strong ability. On the other hand, all Minjun cared about was his game. When Minjun was 7 years old, dungeons and demonic monsters started to appear as well as humans with superpowers, but it never harmed the stability of the civilian population. He started bombing Choi In-ho with questions like if everyone aka game developers were evacuated successfully or if there were game companies to get a job into etc. Choi In-ho slowly filled Minjun into the situation that started 2 years ago. The dungeons started to appear more frequently, and the holes started to become larger. The most shocking thing was that more giant monsters started to arrive through the dungeon. Because of that, the situation got worse and things got out of hand to create such a mess. But Minjun did not care about stuff like that at all. All he wanted to know was if the game industry was still operating the games that he wanted to play. Choi In-ho also informed Minjun that he might look like that, but he got a plus in monster theory and dungeonology when he was in university. Minjun was perplexed to hear that they had subjects like those in schools. Then Choi In-ho asked for Minjun's age, to which Minjun replied that he was 21. Choi In-ho informed Minjun that he was at a perfect age for enlistment. Right then, Minjun got a text on his phone informing him of the notice of his enlistment date. All Minjun wanted was to come back and play the games that he missed so much, but he could not believe he had to enlist for 5 years. Minjun started freaking out about how the hell did they enlist him without doing any physical test, to which Choi In-ho replied that it was all because they were short on manpower. He also told Minjun that it was not like they informed him later, rather Minjun might have seen the notice later. Then Choi In-ho suggested to Minjun that he should go to a PC room close to the evaluation center to double-check the notice. When Minjun's parents disappeared, he holed himself up in his room and played video games all day. So, the PC room was kind of heaven to Minjun. After depleting all his need to play games, Minjun checked the news articles on the internet. Minjun was pissed because he would have been able to take care of all the dungeons if he had the full power that he obtained in Isgard. But for some reason, his body was completely depleted of the demonic energy that was the main source of his dark magic. But still, Minjun had the strength to fight beasts, so he decided to solve all of these by himself. The next day, Minjun arrived at the evaluation center. Everyone there was depressed to send their family members off to the army, but Minjun was bothered less. All he cared about was to know if it would be harder than Isgard or not. But surprisingly, those military commanders were a lot nicer than the instructor he had in Isgard. Minjun regretted not killing that instructor before returning from Isgard. After making everyone fall in line, the commander asked if anyone wanted to apply for the Hunter Corps because the base pay was quite higher than the regular Corps, though it was just a formality. Minjun was the only volunteer to raise his hand for the Hunter Corps. The commander asked him to move forward. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Minjun jumped high and landed at the very front. He then introduced himself to the commander. Back in Isgard, Minjun was hunting in the Forgotten Canyon. He was telling that though dark mages had immense power, it was all for the show if they went out of demonic power. It was not like mana that you could just collect from nature. And as everyone feared dark mages, Minjun did not have anyone to create a party with. So, all he had was himself. That's why if a dark mage ran out of demonic power during dungeon hunting, he was as well dead. So the answer to the question of what a person should do to restore his demonic power was to defeat the monster with maxed out strength. With that, Minjun defeated the boss of the Forgotten Canyon dungeon and gained demonic power. Back to the present, the battalion commander asked Minjun for his reason for joining the Hunter Corps because as the situation was becoming worse, most of the soldiers were converting into normal troops despite having special abilities. Minjun replied that he had some business in the dungeon, so he was joining the Hunter Corps. The battalion commander laughed and considered Minjun a funny person, but it was the truth for Minjun. The dungeons in Korea were managed by the army and the Hunter Corps had the first priority regarding those. The subjugation of monsters also belonged to the Hunter Corps. In the Hunter Corps, one could advance in rank as long as he proved his abilities. Minjun's plan was to conquer as many dungeons as possible because he was sure he would encounter demonic beasts there that would contain demonic power. By conquering all the demonic beasts, he could obtain enough demonic power to recover his lost powers. In this process, Minjun would be able to become a high-salary public hero. Right then, the sergeant of Hunter Corps Lee Seung-ho arrived. Seeing the battalion commander speak formally with just a mere sergeant surprised Minjun. Seung-ho asked Minjun about his stats. Minjun found him to be rude for commanding him like that. But in the army, if anyone told him to do anything, he had to do it. So, he opened his status window to check his stats, but the status window showed an error sign. Somewhere in Gyeonggi-do, where the training center for the Hunter Corps was located, the battalion commander of the Hunter Corps welcomed a recruit named Sun Yunseo. Sun Yunseo made it clear that she did not wish for any biased treatment because of her father. The battalion commander corrected her by saying that it had nothing to do with General Seo. He just called her to share a few words of encouragement. That's all. He also asked Yunseo if she wished to visit her surprisingly interesting comrade. Minjun was brought into the training center to test his abilities. Minjun was mesmerized to see the highly developed training center. He wondered how much tax money they had poured to make that facility. Seung-ho warned Minjun that if he were found out to be a liar after all the testing was done, he should prepare himself to immediately enlist in the military police. Minjun found Seung-ho to be pretty stingy. He asked Seung-ho about the test, to which Seung-ho showed him a mineral called red stone. He instructed Minjun to move it. Minjun was given 10 minutes for moving the mineral even just an inch only. This mineral was not only exceptionally heavy and dense, but also hard as well. It was impossible for a recruit to budge it even a little. Minjun found the task to be very easy. Seung-ho thought that Minjun was some trash who was just taking advantage of the Hunter Corps. The battalion commander of the Hunter Corps came with Yunseo and was observing from the side. He heard from the battalion commander of the training center that Minjun had shown pretty exceptional physical ability. He had highly hoped to see how unique Minjun was. Minjun examined the mineral and instantly recognized it. This was the annoying heavy minerals that he had dealt with in Isgard. Moving it from its place was child's play to him, so he decided to punch and destroy it. If he was lucky, he might obtain some demonic power from it. Minjun punched the mineral and it shattered to pieces, but it was very unfortunate that it did not hold any demonic power. Everyone present there was shocked to see Minjun's inhuman strength. Everyone knew that the Hunter Corps trained their soldiers inhumanly. With such a hard instructor like Seung-ho, it was impossible for anyone to be lazy around the training. But what those recruits did not understand was how Minjun was in so much energy, whereas they were dying of exhaustion. Minjun had so intense training in Isgard that this much training made his body feel as light as a feather. He thought that if he recovered his demonic power, he would be able to fly. Even the meals they served here were quite grandiose than that of Isgard. They even got free time after they were done with their routine. It was a win-win situation for Minjun because there was a PC room in the facility also. Seung-ho was shocked to see Minjun complete an hour routine in 21 minutes. It was a rule that whoever completed it before 30 minutes would get an outing pass. Minjun was the first person ever to get the outing pass. Seung-ho commented that he would be watching Minjun to see how much he was capable of the Hunter Corps. In the dorm, everyone was rejoicing because their stat went up by 1. Minjun could not believe they could so easily advance their stat. When he was in Isgard, he had to almost die to increase his stat. Then his comrades started asking him when he would use the outing pass. They also joked with him about his immense physical strength. Minjun was quite shocked because, in Isgard, people avoided him as if he was some kind of plague. Someone mentioned that the PC room was open, and Minjun ran for it as though his life depended on it. As it was 9 in the night, he calculated that he would be able to get 2 hours of sleep easily. In Isgard, it was hard for him to get even an hour of sleep. Minjun maintained that routine for the 4 weeks of training but was still able to ace the training. The lieutenant came and expressed his disappointment. He commented that not even half of the recruits were able to pass the training. With this, they would not be able to survive at all if they were deployed into a real battle. They would not even pass the dungeon adjustment training. The majority of dungeons would disappear once the monster of it was defeated, but there were some cases where the dungeons remained. In that case, it would transform into a transforming dungeon that would change its internal structure on a regular basis. In real-life training that was facilitated within that transforming dungeons was called dungeon adjustment training. Everyone got discouraged to hear that they had to go through that training. The lieutenant tried to encourage them by telling them that they would be rewarded a vacation of 3 days and 2 nights if they scored top among them. But no one was excited except Minjun after hearing it. Everyone was taken to the dungeon. They started freaking out to see the size of the dungeon. But Minjun was not fazed at all. The higher authority brought monsters like hounds to fill the dungeon. Where everyone was getting scared seeing those, Minjun found them equivalent to Maltese or Chihuahuas. The lieutenant instructed that they would form a 4-members team and they had to kill a hound within an hour. The recruits were given gear to wear, but Minjun could feel that the gear contained the passion and sweat of other people, so he was feeling kind of disgusted about wearing it. The lieutenant also instructed Minjun that he could not outperform and also that he should help his comrades because it was a team task. Minjun took the responsibility to share his plan about how to kill a hound, but his comrades understood nothing that he explained. When the hounds were released from its cage, they ran inside the dungeon instead of attacking the people. Some even asked the reason for that. Minjun answered that after being away for so long, they saw their home, so it was obvious that they would run for it. When one of his comrades asked him how he knew their psychology so well, Minjun imagined how desperately he wanted to return just like those hounds. The first team to enter the dungeon was Minjun's team. Sergeants were stationed inside the dungeon for protection if things went south. When those bystanders saw that Minjun's team had entered, they hoped to see Minjun in action because he was the most exceptional recruit in the training facility. The hounds were ready to attack Minjun's team. Minjun warned his comrades that the hounds were about to attack. His comrades were scared to death, so he decided to take the lead. The hound that was charging his way was defeated with a single punch from Minjun. Another hound had bitten a hand of Minjun's comrades. He started yelling for help. Minjun charged and killed the hound with a kick. He then told his comrade that if he cowered in front of the hound because it was attacking, the hound would think of him as easy prey. If this were a real battle, 2 people already would have died. Minjun then advised that as they were more in number, they should use that as their advantage and put pressure on the hounds. With his lead, his scared comrades were able to recover their courage and take down the remaining hound. The bystanders who were stationed there for protection were shocked to see Minjun give such a good lead. They could not believe that Minjun was only a recruit. It became evident that Minjun's team was going to obtain the top score and the other teams were going to obtain an average score. Those instructors came out and told Minjun to exit with his team. But the timing was very unfortunate. The dungeon's ground started to shake. Minjun's comrades asked if it was an earthquake. Minjun replied that it was not an earthquake, as it was a transforming dungeon. The dungeon was transforming at that very moment, and the exit closed in on itself. Everyone started freaking out except Minjun. The instructor evacuated the recruits to a safe place and started reassuring them that the situation was just an unexpected one and that the lieutenant would take the proper steps as mentioned in the manual. But Minjun noticed the look on their faces. He understood that they were just calming his comrades down and also understood the worst situation they were in. For Minjun, it was not the worst situation but rather a complicated situation because he had dealt with this type of situation in Isgard. The dungeon had become an enclosed dungeon from the transforming dungeon. The instructors were discussing that the only way they could get out of an enclosed dungeon was by defeating all the monsters that resided in that dungeon, and the hope of getting any kind of assistance from outside was close to non-existent. The instructor decided to inform the recruits about their situation and formed a team accordingly because they had to clear the dungeon if they wanted to get out. Suddenly, Minjun smelled something familiar in the air. Right then, the 2 instructors fainted and fell to the ground. Minjun examined them and found that they were all right and only fainted. He gave his instructors to his comrades and told them to wait near the exit. Then, Minjun took off inside the dungeon. His comrades tried to warn him that he might die if he went alone. But Minjun was actually dying of excitement because of the smell he smelled earlier. It was the smell of demonic power. It was fatal to an ordinary human, but it was equivalent to a charger for dark mages. Minjun entered the dense place that was reeking of demonic energy and encountered the dark hound that was much more powerful than normal hounds.